Pleasure to meet with you, Mr. Stevenson.
Pleasure's all mine.
Oh, thank you, man. I want to start first with during the Motown 25, you guys filmed a Songwriters Roundtable around the piano.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Everybody's around the table, the playing cards, you guys, the laughs, the jokes. Do you remember that taping?
Quite a bit of it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
What are some of the things that stand out that you remember from the taping of the Songwriters Roundtable at Motown 25?
Well, the feeling I got was the most important thing for me. And after, say, not being together in that kind of a grouping for years, it took me back to when we were at the studio, and the respect and love that the guys had for me when we were at that table, it carried on through as if we never parted. That was the most amazing feeling that I had. The same respect and understanding and love that they had then, it was then again at that table 25 years later. That was fantastic.
One thing I get from those conversations and the things that I've heard about you is just how hard you worked at helping make Motown the sound what it is. Can you talk about just some of the, I guess, trials of being the first A&R at the Sound of Young America or at Motown?
Well, let me say this. When you say how hard I worked, to me it was a joy. It wasn't a job. And I tell all my producers and writers and friends that I work with now that they say, man, you guys worked all the time, and you went. I said, let's get it straight. When you can do something that you love, it is not a job. It only becomes a job to someone looking at you working. But when you love what you do, you can do it 24/7. So we actually worked around the clock, but we enjoyed doing what we were doing around the clock. So when you put that into the picture, it turns into a whole nother ballgame, see?
So what role did you play in this songwriter-producer competition that fueled you guys?
Well, my job was to get the best out of each writer and producer that I could. Have them come to, say, reach for things that they didn't know they had in them. And to make that happen, it was like, to some I was a friend, to some I was a mentor, to some I was a teacher. Each producer and writer and artist, I had another title with them. Even though I was, quote, the A&R director of Motown, I was still on a personal level a different person. And I used that person to get the best out of them, see?
All right, so I'm gonna throw some of the names around of the people who are around the piano with you. 1 second.
We're filming an interview in.
I am going to throw some of the names around of your brothers that were around the table with you, around the piano with you that day, and I just want to get your first response.
Okay.
The first name is Ron Miller.
Ron Miller? He was a genius. He was extremely talented, and it poured out of him in everything that he did. And he was a joy to work with.
Can you name one of the favorite songs that Ron Miller composed or wrote that you really enjoyed?
Yeah. The favorite song was his #1 song, which was our biggest standard song for Motown. And that came out of one of the, let's say, the joy moments of my life was to meet Ron Miller, who was a pizza salesman. And in my documentary, in my story, I explained it very clearly. But the bottom line was he was a pizza salesman selling pizza, and we met in Chicago at a weird time, say 2 o'clock in the morning on the south side of Chicago. Ron, being white, was the scariest thing he could have done. But he was so impressed, trying to impress me, that he was a songwriter until when I heard him write his song, play his song for me at an audition for someone else. I said to him, "You come with me and I'll make you a songwriter." And he said, "You mean come to Detroit?" I said, "Yes, now." And to cut a long story short, he did that. On my word, he came in. And he brought that song with him. That was a great moment in history.
So I think I'm going to ask you about Harvey Fuqua.
Harvey Fuqua. Brilliant, talented, and he had all these things before he came to Motown as a Moonglow. Harvey Fuqua and the Moonglows. Remember that? Well, for those of you who don't, that was his original thing. And he had an air about him that was good for us. Not only as a producer, but he brought some professionalism that spilled off for the rest of the young, talented people that was around us. They could pick up from Harvey some good things.
All right, Norman Whitfield.
Norman Whitfield. Arrogant, strong-headed, extremely talented, and hungry. That made him non-stop and thirst for getting to be the best that he could be. Brian Holland. Sensitive, passionate, and he was a giving person. And in his lyrics, in his writing, all that came out of him, all the time.
Just for the sake of the interview, is it possible you could say Brian Holland?
Brian Holland?
Yes, Brian Holland was sensitive.
Brian Holland was sensitive, passionate, and in his lyrics that came out on every song, when you heard his part of a song, you could tell that was Brian's Holland.
Eddie Holland.
Eddie Holland. Introvert, quiet, very clever, and as we all know, a very good writer. He was, Eddie would listen to me. Nobody thought he would, but he and I had a great communication. When I needed songs and I needed a moment and I needed production, instead of talking to Brian and Lamont, I would talk to Eddie. I'd say, like, "Eddie, here's what I need, and I need it now." And he'd say, "Okay, William R., you got it." So we had a great relationship.
Finally, Lamont Dozier.
Lamont Dozier. Lamont was a combination of all of them put together. And very warm. And Lamont could have been a great singer artist, but he had so many tunes and things in him until it was better that he delivered them for others. But he had so much music in him. It was incredible. He could play piano. He just had music in him in every place. He was very good.
You know, in that round table, you guys had the cards. You know, you guys were cracking jokes on each other. Can you just talk about the camaraderie you guys had, just how you guys would, try to one up each other, not only in music but just in having fun?
Well, we had it was a family affair, and competitive, but still a family affair. So with that, we could laugh and joke, and then get up and go write a song and try to beat the next producer to the artist. Now, my job was to see to it that this competition stayed in the picture, but the love stayed there as well. I'll give you an example. If you were writing a song and one of the other writers would walk by and hear you, and they see you were in a mood where you were stuck, couldn't get past, we call it a wall, you could sing that song and then he'd add a line or two or give you an idea to get past that wall. Now to do that, you gotta love. You gotta love the art, the person you're dealing with, not competition, that's out of the picture completely, just helping you. Because once I get stuck, you'd come by and help me. Now, it's up to that writer to give you a part of that song or a point or 2 points, whatever. But that was not the point. The point was, make that song the best and help you out. At the same time, you could be in competition with another producer on the artist. So now I had to listen and see which tune was the best one to go on that artist and let the other producer know that, hey, since you helped him, you got the next shot. So man, that's a whole nother ball game. And I gotta say that Gordy set that stage of love in the beginning of this Motown company business. And that was a very rare, unique thing. I put that in the hands, and this is my opinion, of God. I think this was all God's doing. All right? We happen to be instruments to make this happen at a time in Detroit and the world where blacks had the roughest time in every facet of anything. And out of no place where we built cars, not music, a great sound came out for the whole world. I call that God's doing.
There's two other songwriters I'm about to ask you about, and one of them is Smokey Robinson. Can you talk to me about how Smokey, when you first interacted with Smokey, some of your first interactions with Smokey, and in particular Smokey as a young songwriter?
Well, Smokey was, first of all, you're talking about my brother. I love Smokey Robinson. And we were brothers from the beginning, and we're brothers now. All right. He was, or is, not only gifted, but given this great talent for the purpose of this Motown machine to move forward, which is also part of the creator's idea. And he was given this talent in such a way that it was always full of love and wonderful dialogue, lyrics, melody. It was always coming from him. Smokey would present this kind of feeling almost in everything that he did. He was, I think, protected by the powers to be so that he could do just that. And every writer and every producer at Motown got a little Smokey in them from working around him and with him. It was a joy to work with him then, and we still work together right now. He's never changed. He's one of the few talented people, I would say, and I've met a lot of great artists, that never changed. He'd sign every autograph, take every picture, never stop. To this very day, he does that.
Gordy, as a songwriter, you were with him early on, before he became the man behind the whole machine, but when he was a songwriter as well. Can you talk about that?
I can't say too much about him as a songwriter. And he was a songwriter, no question. You know, To Be Loved, and it was one of my favorite songs on Jackie Wilson. And, you know, don't question about him being a songwriter. But for me, that was his way to get into the business. And with the gifts given to Barry, which is more than a songwriter, we all have more than one gift that God gives us. But in his case, he had the gift of getting the right people to do the right things at the right time. That's a whole nother gift, all right? And it's very rare. I think most great people in the world has to have that kind of gift, whether they're soldiers or builders, or they have to have that. That's part of what they need to get others to follow them. And that was his gift. Now, songwriting was part of it, but not as much. And I say this very clearly in my book and in my documentary, that for me, Berry Gordy was given the gift to do just what I said. Get the right people, do the right things at the right time. That's fantastic.
It is.
Sit
Your
over here. Get a better angle.
You're seeing Martha perform and knowing to tell her to come over to Motown to see you. Can you explain, when you witnessed Martha, what made you say, I need you to come see me?
Well, didn't quite go like that, but Martha was my, I said secretary. Martha said, I was your assistant. Martha became my assistant by way of being at the right place at the right time. And from there, we went into recording. Martha was always, her voice was there. It's just the idea that she had an unusual sound next to the other people we were working with. But she became my assistant first. From that point, she became an artist, which we also have, that relationship never changed. And she'll tell you about it, trust me.
You know, Dancing in the Street is just one of those amazing records that translates through time. And it's also the first record that starts off Motown 25 with the big dance number choreographed by Lester, I want to say Lester Young, or is Lester Wilson?
On the Motown show.
On the Motown show.
Great show.
Can you talk to me about how you felt seeing your song come alive in that way?
It was a joy. Smokey Robinson always said, when you hear your songs on the radio, some artists would say, oh, that's my song. But we would say, turn it up, turn it up. It's a joy. It was a great joy. And the song has been around forever, and it only seems to keep growing and keep going. And to hear my sons and daughters love the song is even more of a joy to me, because that means it'll live on and on and on. And the Motown show itself is just such a unique, I call it the Ziegfeld approach to now. You know, Ziegfeld would take song to song to song and stage each song separately. And when you take 40 great songs or 50 great songs and do that, that's huge. So the whole show with all the songs in there are done. It was great.
You know, Gil Askey is somebody who I've gravitated to by just working on this piece. Did you work with Gil at all?
I brought Gil to Motown.
Can you talk to me about Gil Askey and just what you recognized in him and why you brought him to Motown, and then how he flourished once you got him there?
I recognized, I found Gil Askey in Atlantic City. As the A&R man, and I have to give this credit back to Berry Gordy, he allowed me to do whatever I thought that would make the company grow. Coming out of just being an A&R man, finding artists and writers and songs, I could find whatever I thought would work and bring it to the company. He never stopped me from doing that. In Atlantic City, I found Gil Askey with a show called The Smart Affairs, I think it was, yes. And when I heard his arrangements, this was a girl dancing show, like a cotton club approach. And when I heard that arrangement, he took blues and jazz and fused it with great horn riffs. And I'm in the audience, and I heard this music. I said, "Wow, who did that arrangement?" And I spoke to the owner of the club, and he said, "Well, Gil Askey." I said, "I want to meet him." And so they brought Gil over to my table, and I told him who I was, and I said, "We need you." He said, "Who are you? What do you mean?" I said, "The kind of music that you're doing, we need that at Motown. We have a lot of great young talent, but we need this kind of professional experience that you got in our music. And we need, see, and back in the day, music would always end with fades. You remember, it'd fade out, and they turn it down until it's over. And even on stage, they'd have to kind of give it the same. And then when they fade in, and bah, that's it. But Gil, when I heard Gil's arrangement, the music would have endings and segues. And I said, "Man, we need this." And he said, "Well, you guys, I do jazz and all." I said, "Listen, we need your music." I asked him how much was he making. He told me. I said, "I'll double it." And I said, "You want to do arrangements? I'll have enough arrangements where you can work night and day." And he said to me, "This company, you got a lot of passion for this company." I said, "They're all young black people, and they need someone like you with the experience so that when we hit the stage and hit the scene, we will come off great, not just another kind of artist. And you could put the greatness in there." And he said, "Wow, when do you want me to come?" I said, 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, he showed up. And Barry said to me, "What are we going to do with him?" I said, "You'll see." I started him off with the Four Tops. Well, when Barry heard his music, he immediately took him to Diana Ross and the Supremes. He never left.
Can you describe for me, like, what West Grand Boulevard was like in those days when you were basically saying, "Hey, come to Detroit"?
Well, you mean Hitville?
Hitville. Thank you. Sorry, come to Hitville.
Yeah. Well, that was the home, in my opinion, for black artists to be themselves, have the help they needed, and those that we signed, the point was, if I signed you as an artist, we would do the best we could to make you the best you could be. And if I didn't think that was going to work, no signing. It stopped right there at the audition. And once that word got out, artists came from all over the country because it was a home. Motown was a home for black talented artists. And we were proud of that.
I'm going to fast forward back up to Motown 25, the show, because you were there that night. Mm-hmm. Do you have any specific recollections of that evening?
It was just a great homecoming to me. It was just full of memories and joy, and everybody was overwhelmed to see the other person and each other, and the hugs, and it was like the family had come together again. And what's interesting about the Motown family, and when I left Motown, I went through a lot of other companies and did a lot of things and did musical plays and shows and all that. That feeling at Motown has never been repeated again. So that was, back to what I was saying earlier, that was all from the man upstairs. He made that happen for a purpose. Total strangers come together to become one family and then produce. And then 25 years later, that same feeling, no matter where they came from, they come together and meet again, and no one, as if we never parted. That's fantastic, man.
So Marvin performed that night, an amazing performance. Can you tell me what you remember about his performance and just how, over the years, you saw him grow?
Well, his performance was Marvin. His growth was phenomenal. I don't know if you had the story on Marvin Gaye, but Smokey Robinson will tell you better than anybody else. I was told by Barry that he wanted a hit on Marvin. And Marvin, being a jazz singer at the time, gave me quite an obstacle to overcome. I'd say, now how do I go take from jazz to make him an R&B singer and still keep him feeling, doing something that he couldn't handle? And it took me a while to make it happen, but I made it happen. And when it happened, he just took over at that point. We did it with, I think his first song was Stubborn Kind of Fella. And then from that point to Hitchhike or Pride and Joy, something like that we did. And it moved on. And each time he got better and better to the point that he never asked me to do jazz again, although I promised him that I would do a jazz album if he'd do R&B for me. And it was funny. But once he got it, his confidence was grown, huge. So he could do anything.
Before I get to Michael Jackson and Stevie, I gotta ask you, how important was it to chart back then? And what were the charts? And just how, like, you know, you would say a song is a hit if it was in the top 15 or the top 20, like, but how did charts play a role in how you guys, I guess, market and build stars?
How did charts play a role?
Like
Billboard charts?
Billboard charts. I'm sorry, it could have been musical charts. Billboard charts. The other, I guess, the world. What was it? The world.
It was Billboard, Hit Parade. There was Cashbox. We had the R&B charts for Black Magazine, which was called. Can't think of it. The title. That's ridiculous. Can't think of that title of the magazine. But to be very honest about it, charts never entered my mind until, I guess, maybe later on in the role of producing records. And the reason was, I felt that the writers and producers had to write and produce from here, not for what they thought other people would deal with. And if you did a song to be a hit without coming from the heart, it didn't make any sense to me. If you did it from the heart and it became a hit, that's a whole nother ballgame. And I'm saying it to say that we had an audience, a black audience. You know, we're talking about a time when records were only played on certain stations at certain times during the day, and then they cut the station off, and that's it. So you heard some of the records that were big were played in the street by record stores with loudspeakers, and you know, you walk by the Crenshaws, the 12th Streets, and different neighborhood areas where you could hear this music playing and say, who is that? Who's that artist? And it built from that point of view, and live performances of Temps and little clubs and the tops, and you know, it was a building process. So billboards and record world meant nothing to us at that time. But as our music spread out and more people got involved in listening to the Motown sound, they had to put some of this stuff into the magazines because it was moving. Well, our promotion department, thanks to Barney Ailes, did their job and took advantage of that to the point of, if you can play other records that's not as good as ours and they get credit, how about giving credit to those that we're doing? So now it becomes a business, and the charts become a standard of saying what's good or bad for other stations to start playing our product. So it became a whole nother ballgame. At that point, it became important that you were in the charts. Well, for me, as an A&R director, once I found out that it meant something to get the rest of the world to play our product, now I want to keep as many as 8 to 10 songs in there at all times. So now I took on a whole nother level as an A&R man. Forget about just having some, I want all I can get. And so the promotion department loved me for that, and I loved them for putting them in there. So now it was a whole nother ball game going on. You got it? Okay.
Hey, Michael came into the songwriters room while you guys were taping Michael Jackson.
I was not there when Michael Jackson came in. When Michael came to the company, I had left Motown.
Okay, when Michael came into the room when you guys were filming at the piano, he hugged all you guys.
Right. Well, he knew who we were, and it was not a secret about who we were. But as he became better at greater talent, I left the company during that time. But he knew who I was, because my job was clear.
How about Stevie? Can you talk to me about when he came to the company?
Stevie was another gifted, talented person from day one for a purpose. Back again to the man upstairs. And anytime Stevie Wonder could come in and learn in a very short period of time how to write and
We're
produce.
going to pick up Stevie one more time. I'm going to stand outside just to keep.
Yeah, this one, and then we can bring Martha in. Ready?
Well, I don't know where. See what. Could you find out if Martha's ready? Oh, okay.
I'm gonna ask you about Stevie when he came to Hitville and about his performance that night. But first, on Motown 25, if you remember. However, can you talk about Stevie when he came to Hitville and just the bundle of energy it was, and how you guys thought to make him, to utilize that energy to make him the star he was, or the young performer that he was?
Like I say, Stevie Wonder was a talent that was destined to do what he's done. It was not like we discovered Stevie, We just helped Stevie go on his way to where he was going to be. I was very excited about Stevie when I saw him play drums, piano, harmonica, and sing all at one time on one song as a kid. That's incredible. And when that happened, all the producers and writers went to work when they heard him do that, because that was just unheard of. It was, and very few kids for us, and at that time in the 60s, there was very few kids, that could do that, be that talented, give up that much energy and be saying something. I'm sure they were out there, but we didn't know about it. When he came to us, that was just one. There was, it opened doors, So he was handed to our company by the grace of the good Lord. What can I tell you?
So before Martha comes in, Diana Ross, talk to me about when you first saw her and you recognized her as a talent. She was there while you were
Yeah. Diana Ross, Supremes. They were named something else before that, but she was another artist that was destined to be great. And I say that because when artists work night and day and study hard and do the choreography right, and once it stops and they make a mistake, they'll start all over again without you telling them. When you find artists that work like that, you can't stop them. Nobody can. I said in my book and in my documentary that certain things about artists, no matter where they come from, when they go at it, let nothing stop them. The song could be what will bring them in the door, but the persistent attitude of being great and working at it fully is what takes them over the top. That's why some artists come to a certain level and they just fall out of the way, because that work ethic that you got to have in your heart. She had it.
4 tops.
Nobody else sang them. I discovered the Four Tops too. When I say discovered, meant I brought them to the company.
Really?
Oh yeah. Great singers.
Excuse us. The entourage has arrived.